He's my friend, he's not my friend. Friends are the ones who are there in the end. He's my friend, they're not my friends.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Introversion Podcast. Welcome to part one of a 38-part series on friendship and Facebook and social media. No, I'm just kidding. It's not 38 parts. But whatever I say today will be continued in some fashion in future episodes because I can't really address it all here and now. But, oh man, there's so much swirling around in my head this past week. As usual, I guess. It's the new normal. There's a lot for me to say today, and I was meaning to record this episode 2 days ago. Got busy with other things. I was meaning to record about this yesterday, and a lot of other things came up, and I don't even have a lot of time today, but I'm going to be going out of town this weekend, and I feel like, you know what, I wanted to get this out there. So, because it may be another week before I post a new episode, so I wanted to leave this set of thoughts out there. At the same time, I have to be really careful about what I'm going to say today because it's not like I want to make enemies with this post. It's not like I want to go out of my way to upset people or demonize people or whatever negative consequences could come out of this if I phrase things in a poor way. So I want to be careful to choose my words wisely, but at the same time, I don't want to spend days and weeks and months trying to choose exactly the right words out of fear of offending people or whatever, because again, it kind of goes back to my original post in the podcast, the first episode where I talked about perfectionism. You know, it's kind of like if I try to make this absolutely perfect, it's going to take me weeks to phrase it just right. And even when I phrase things as I deem them to be just right, it's still going to offend people. It's still going to bother people. It's still going to rile people up, and so it's kind of a lost cause, right? To go about creating content and putting your voice out there in the world in the hopes of not offending people, right? It's kind of a lost cause these days because no matter what you say, you can say the sky is blue, and the grass is green, and guess what? You just pissed off 30 people with that, So it's kind of like when it gets like that, it's kind of like, you know what? Fuck it. Speak your mind, put your truth out there, and that's what I'm going to do now. And I'm going to try to do so calmly and gently, but I want to speak very frankly about the nature of friendships and social media and Facebook and how all of these things tie together and what they mean to me, and I'm curious what they mean to you. I think everyone out there probably has their own unique vision or definition of what a friend is and the role of Facebook in their life or any of these things, and that's fine. I think there's probably a lot of overlap with most people and how they define a friend and and how they use Facebook, but there's always going to be nuance, and I'm going to lay out today kind of how I see things. And what I say today, how I define terms today, is not necessarily how I would have defined things 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So it's continually evolving. So what I say today is very specific to this moment in time. And I had someone say to me the other day that, like, dude, you need to get out and out of this quarantine and out and around people again because it's affecting your thoughts. It's affecting how you're viewing it. And I'm like, hey, I don't disagree, but that's also easier said than done. I just don't have fucking Facebook chimes. Jesus. I thought I turned off all the notifications and everything. Now I got to figure out what tab is. Close. Looks like there's more people for me to unfriend maybe in a second. Let me go over here. Mute site. Sorry for the interruption there. I'm trying to turn off all the Facebook chimes and everything because that's coincidentally that's what we're talking about today. So where was I? So, yeah, I was talking about the definition of a friend and friendship and sort of where I'm at in life with all that. And it's so strange these days because it's really hard to pinpoint any sort of solidity about any concept, like what is a man even? What is a woman even? Like even that's up in the air, like identity and race and from the same friend, I will hear there's no such thing as race. That was a white construct. They made it up. And then I'll hear from the same friend that all white people are racist. So you're, on the one hand, you say there's no such thing as race. On the other hand, you say, well, the white race is all racist. Okay. That doesn't make sense to me, but okay. I'm not going to get off on that tangent, but yeah, I want to talk about friends, and I'm sitting here really evaluating the role of friendship in my life. And I think I've gone through periods of time, maybe where I felt closer with my family, where I felt like, maybe friends aren't as important. Maybe your significant other and your family and your kids, if you had kids, and that's what's most important. And friends are just kind of on the periphery and they don't really matter as much. At times I've probably thought along those lines. I certainly wasn't raised to value friendships that much, and I think my sister paid the price for that more than I did, because my parents didn't really have friends. They were new to this country, and we kept moving around in the military, as I've talked about before, so I wasn't really raised with friendship as a value, or as something to cherish and put on a pedestal and uplift. I certainly didn't get that from my parents. But that being said, I did have a bunch of good friendships as a kid. I remember I had a lot of good childhood experiences with friends, growing up and moving around in Maryland and Virginia and Germany. And unfortunately, because I grew up in the military, these were all very short-lived friendships. And this was before the days of Facebook, before the internet. So really, once you move, that's it. Those other friends, those peers aren't in your life anymore when you're on the other side of the country or in a different state or whatever. So as a child growing up, you just had to get used to leaving people behind. And I'm not calling it good or bad or healthy or unhealthy. I'm just saying it is what it is. It was what it was. And now in my 40s as an adult, I'm reflecting on the impact of that upbringing. And I'm sitting here trying to decide friends in my life, because I think we're afforded a certain luxury now with the internet and Facebook and social media where you can reconnect. I've reconnected with a few of those childhood friends, and I've seen very few of them in person as adults, but we've exchanged a few messages or friended each other on Facebook here and there in the last 10, 15 years. So it begs this question. You can reconnect with all these people who at a time were good friends of yours as a child or in high school or college or whatever, but what is the role of evolution, personal evolution, where you're friends with somebody at a certain point in your life, and that's a great thing, but as we all know, we all have different trajectories in life, right? So is it good, is it healthy, is it right to say, okay, at that point in my life, that was a good friend and that worked and it was beneficial for both of us, and that was a beautiful thing, it was a wonderful thing, but neither of us are in that same point in life, and the presence of that person in my life today, given the person they are today, given the person I am today, and the fact that this is all happening digitally because we are no longer even in the same city or hemisphere or whatever. So you can't even spend time with the person in real life. It begs this question of, should you let that go? Should you let that person go and remember that particular friendship with fond memories and just, accept that that's what it was, but no longer is? And thus you unfriend them, remove them from your field of vision, and let them only live in your memories in a positive light, right? As opposed to remaining connected to them via social media and they get on your case. The only time you ever hear from them is them complaining about something you posted. They don't like your views. And even though if you ever go look on their page, which maybe won't be that often, you see stuff they're posting and you're like, I don't like their views either. But I don't go off mouthing off on their page commenting about how I don't like their views. I see what they post. I don't like it. And I just scroll down. I go about my day. That's typically how I operate when I'm dealing with people, friends, whoever, who I disagree with ideologically, is most of the time I will just scroll by. I'm not going to pick a fight. I'm not going to point out to them how they're wrong about this thing they believe. For multiple reasons I won't do that. One is that, if they post something that I vehemently disagree with and, 40 of their friends like it, I'm not going to sit here and be that guy who's like, hey, actually, I think you're wrong about this, because not only do I have to deal with the back and forth with the friend, I also have to deal with all their friends ganging up on me. And I'm like, you know what? It's really not worth it. What am I trying to accomplish here or pull off here, So that's why I typically just, I scroll on by. And I probably mentioned this. Yeah, I think I did mention this a few weeks ago on the podcast, how I started unfollowing a bunch of friends. And I did so, again, not out of disgust or anger or whatever with them, but more so for my own sanity, because I did not want to keep getting hit over the head constantly. Like if I go to check on Facebook to see what friends are posting, I like to see stuff that my friends are up to. I like to see jokes and memes and things that remind me about them and what I like about them and their sense of humor and their personality, memes and whatever else. And, that was kind of the dream, right? That was kind of what Facebook was supposed to be. And I liked Facebook for the first couple of years because I felt like it was great for me to go deeper with friends I already had. And at the same time, when I would meet new people in New York, if I go to a party and just chat up somebody, a guy or a girl or whoever, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, this was a good initial meeting, conversation. Like, here, let's friend each other on Facebook. And we can casually kind of take it to the next level, right? So we can become, from complete strangers to acquaintances, to maybe potentially friends. Maybe we meet up and hang out in some future event, or maybe we collaborate on some project, whatever. But like there was a certain flow there. There was a certain pattern of like Facebook was about connecting people. It was this tool, this mechanism for, strengthening existing friendships and also allowing new friendships to blossom. I always said that Facebook was not a means for meeting new people. And I still kind of stand by that. It's really not that kind of platform. It was always more like when I post something on Facebook, the only people who are going to see it are my friends, the people who already know me. So I hadn't really ever used Facebook as a public platform and a means of meeting and connecting with people outside of my immediate social network. But that's changing for me a little bit because I've started to make certain posts public. And when I've been commenting on other friends' posts here and there, I kind of get a sense of some other friends of friends and what their political views are, what their ideology is like. And if I like the way somebody thinks, I might send them a message and we might chat for a little bit. And if I say, hey, well, if you want to be friends, let's be friends. And then we send Facebook friend requests and we're friends. We're Facebook friends, at least. So that has been a new process. But again, it's kind of weird because it's a substitute, right? It's kind of the substitute for the house party that used to happen not only pre-pandemic, but actually back when I was in New York, when I was going out all the time and I was meeting people all the time and going to parties and networking events and all this stuff, which I was hoping to do more this year in Philly because I moved to Philly basically last year. I didn't really go out a ton in terms of networking and all that, so I didn't really build up a big community here. But now that I felt like with my own apartment and projects I was working on in 2019, I was looking forward to 2020 being a year where I was going to go out more and go to more meetup groups and try to find a new friend network here in Philly. But sure enough, the pandemic happened and that's out. So now everything is purely online because, you can't meet in person. But So back to what I was saying, there was basically a flow, right? You meet people, you add them on Facebook casually, you get to know each other better, and. But the difference is now is, I'll use this as a segue into what I want to talk about next. So you can call it a project or whatever, I don't know. But I've basically begun this little exercise where I thought about this past week. I really thought about my social network, and I had 743 Facebook friends. And then I realized the vast majority of these quote unquote friends, they never comment on anything that I post. They never like anything I post. And at the same time, I never see anything that they post. And this is a commentary not necessarily on the nature of our friendship, but on the nature of the algorithms that choose to show us, what content and which friends posting what things. I found this interesting. So also this past week, I reached out to my friend Ryan, and one of my several friends, Ryan. And I remember at the time we were used to be really great friends back when we lived in San Francisco, really great friends. Me and his wife, we're all great friends. And I remember after 2008 and Obama, I became an Obama fan, and this friend was not a fan of Obama. And it wasn't that heated. I heard what he had to say. He heard what I had to say, and we just agreed to disagree. I liked Obama. He didn't. And but we kind of stopped talking. We kind of drifted apart for not just that reason, for a number of different reasons. They had a couple kids, and he's busy with work, and I was going in a different direction with my life, so that's fine. But the other day I thought, I bet you he and I are probably thinking more on the same page these days politically and ideologically. So I was like, let me reach out to him and see what he's up to. So first thing I do is I go look at his Facebook profile, which I haven't seen his Facebook page in ages. And I see he had a post here in June, and a post here and there in June and May. And I'm like, okay, so he's still alive and he's still posting stuff regularly. And I'm like, but how come I haven't seen a post of his in my Facebook feed for years? And then again, back to this point of the algorithm and what is Facebook going to choose to show me or not show me? I mean, let's face it, when you have a real friendship, you will both be actively involved in maintaining that friendship. But when something is kind of, when he has hundreds of friends and I have hundreds of different friends and we're not geographically close, and the natural forces of life just take us apart, right? So if we're counting on Facebook and the algorithm of Facebook to be a link that keeps us together, you know what I'm saying? And clearly that was a case where the algorithm wasn't doing anything to foster a friendship between us, so we just drifted. So anyway, like I said, I looked at his profile and I'm like, okay, all right, still alive, still doing well. I still like how he posts and presents himself and his ideas. He's a creative guy. He's a cool guy. So I reached out to him. I sent him a message. And next thing I know, we're DMing, and we get back in touch, and we're actually kind of more on the same page now about everything politically and all this stuff. So we only had a brief chance to chat, so we didn't fully get all into it. But it was like that friendship, I feel, has, we'll see how things go, but it has at least been reconnected. I don't want to say reignited because, like I said, he's busy with his life doing a lot of things. I'm busy with my life. So I don't know how close we're going to get and recover and get back. I don't think we'll get back to as close as we were years ago when we were actually living in the same city. And I think it's just one of those things. I think no matter how much you love people as friends or whatever, or even family, when you're not geographically, when you're not in the same vicinity, when you're not in the same city or even time zone, it's like it's hard to prevent those friendships and relationships from drifting. It's really hard, and the best friends put at least some effort into maintaining the friendship and keeping things going. But a lot of times these things drift apart. And on the other hand, I do have a bunch of other friends who are close friends where we don't talk that often, but I'm like, you know what? When I go visit Frankfurt, I can visit my friend Sarah, and we'll pick up right where we left off, and we'll reminisce, and we'll talk about the new things going on, and we'll reconnect, and it'll be great. So I do have a handful of those friends where we don't need to stay in touch all the time, because whenever we end up geographically together, we can pick up where we left off, and it'll be great. And we know that. It's kind of unspoken, So yeah, those kind of relationships are going to be more rare, but they are there. They do exist for me, and I'm sure for a lot of you out there as well. Those are special relationships. But I want to get in here to the meat of the topic, because really nothing I've said so far is controversial. Nothing is offensive, right? I think everybody listening would think, yeah, that's totally reasonable. That's totally right. But I want to get into not these sort of lifelong friends, these people that you feel a soul connection with, that even if you don't talk for 10 years, you can reconnect like that and you'll be fine. So I want to talk about the whole range of, like, let's talk about all these people I met at parties in New York, and I met them once or twice and we, became Facebook friends, but what does that mean now? And so here's my thought process is I started to look at this as almost like I posted an article on Medium about Stoicism when I turned 40. Well, basically, I think it was, when I turned 43. So I talked about 42 was the year I discovered Stoicism. In line with the philosophy of Stoicism is minimalism. And I think that's one thing I've struggled with for a while for a number of reasons, but really developing a laser beam focus with everything in your life, like your priorities, how you spend your time, how you allocate your resources, how you spend your money. And I've probably done okay, maybe better than a lot of people, but I feel like it hasn't nearly been good enough, in the sense that I feel like I've spread myself too thin. I've tried to take on too many different projects, and I'm one of those people who's always coming up with ideas, and I want to pursue those ideas, and I get more and more frustrated every week and month and year because I'm not following through on actualizing those ideas, on bringing them to life. So it's a tough dilemma, because, like, what do? You just keep jotting down these ideas that you're never going to get to. Do you try to somehow suppress the ideas from coming and just blot out your mind and maybe just don't write them all down? Maybe only write down the absolute genius ideas? I don't know. But my strategy has been, as I come up with ideas, jot them down for some other time in life where I'll get around to them. But we all know. I mean, I've said this before to friends. I said, I have so many ideas, whether it's t-shirt ideas, film ideas, music ideas, anything. It's like I already have such a list of ideas that's so long that if I never came up with another single idea, I still wouldn't have enough time left in my life to make every film that I've had an idea for, or make every song or track or band name or all these things. So really, when you start to think about that, it really boils down to, look, okay, I got 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years left in life, like halfway through my life. And as I get older, my pace is going to slow down. I'm going to lose, more and more of my senses and abilities physically. So in terms of the real core years of productivity, where you're mentally sharp and you're physically able, maybe it is only the next 10, 15 years. So the documentary film that I want to do, the music that I want to make, the art that I want to make, the videos that I want to make, like all these things, it's like, well, a lot of that I think really needs to happen in the next 10, 15 years. So it really lights a fire under your ass to, like, get this shit done. So anyway, I'm just thinking about all that, right? So minimalism and essentialism, really, and Stoicism, it's really about focusing on what is most important in your life, in terms of your values, in terms of people in your life, in terms of your projects and your ideas, and how you're going to spend your time and your money and your resources, right? That's really what it all comes down to. So since this episode is about friends, I'm just going to focus on that for now. I'm just going to try not to get off topic here about career and ideas and all these other things. So let's just talk about friends and the people in your life. Now, I started applying this minimalism to the concept of friendship. And I started realizing, like, what the hell is the point of me having 743 friends if I only interact with, maybe on a regular basis, maybe 50 people tops? And I'm not saying I should unfriend all the other, 743 minus 50 or whatever, but I need to start, I think, moving in this direction of categorizing and kind of weeding out the pointless and the useless that's just bloating the numbers, So I started to think about this in terms of, like, hoarding, right? So that Lifetime channel show or whatever it is, the Discovery show, the Hoarders or whatever it is. I don't watch that kind of show, but I'm, what I'm talking about. It's appalling to me, these people who just gather up all this junk in these houses and the closets are overflowing, and it's just like, damn, man, like, it's fucking bonkers. But I think, I'm actually somewhat of a digital hoarder though. And I have plenty of disk space, so I feel less inclined to delete things. So I have all these files and movies and photos, and a lot of it is stuff that's low quality or kind of garbage or stuff I'll never actually look at or doesn't give any value to my life. But I keep it around because it's like, why not? I got plenty of disk space for it. But that is something I'm starting to rethink. And again, I don't want to go off on topic about minimalism in other departments, but let's talk about friends and people here. So let's talk about the people in my life, right? So I started this exercise, like I said last week. And the way I'm looking at it, I'm going to do this in 2 waves. And the first wave of unfriendings, let's call it what it is. The first wave of unfriendings is basically looking at the low-hanging fruit. So it's basically people who I barely know, I barely remember even. Not only that, that's kind of the first criteria, but I'll look at them, I will click through onto their Facebook profile, and then I'll look at and see what they're posting and what they're all about today in 2020. So maybe I barely knew that person, or maybe I barely remember that person. But maybe if I go look at their page now today, I can look at their page and be like, oh, wow, this is actually a cool person. Like I barely knew them before, but maybe I should know them better. Maybe I should connect deeper with this person. So at the very least, I should keep them as a Facebook friend. But then maybe decide, maybe I should start to periodically check out what they're posting, or maybe send them a message and say hello or something like that. But as difficult as I thought this first wave of unfriendings would be, I was surprised at how remarkably easy it was. Because what's ended up happening is, and what I've ended up realizing is, all these people, and remember, this is just my first wave. So this is just me specifically looking at accounts of people I'm so loosely connected with. So like a friend of a friend of a friend, or like a friend of a friend, or I met them once at a party, or a coworker who sent me a friend request at RGA and I just barely knew them, whatever. So I'm looking at only these people. And to give you some numbers here, remember, this is all within wave 1. Day 1, I went through first names, A through E, and I went from 743 down to 716. Day 2, I did E through J. I unfriended another 15 people, went from 716 down to 701. Day 3 is today, actually, this morning. I went through K through O, and I went from 701 down to 682. Now remember what I'm saying, that this was actually remarkably effortless. I really didn't flinch much because it was like, okay, people I barely knew, barely remember. These aren't people who I have nasty memories about or who I vehemently disagree with what they're posting nowadays. But the commentary I want to make here now is the eye-opening thing for me is that, wow, most people I know, most of these Facebook profiles, at least the ones I've looked at so far, and I might change this opinion as I start to look more closely in wave 2 at my actual former friends, people beyond an acquaintance level. But for right now, I'm just talking about these people who I've met. If I were to keep going from O to, whatever T or, U, whatever's next, I think I will probably make it down to I will have unfriended 100 people just in this first wave alone. And of these, now that doesn't mean I've only looked at 100 profiles, though, because I've actually looked at a few more and decided to go ahead and keep them as a friend. But even with some of those, like my point is here, so many of these profiles are just carbon copies of each other. And what I mean by that is you can just swap one face for another face or whatever, racially. It doesn't even matter. But it's like people are posting. Everybody's Facebook profile was basically consisting of, and especially noticeable on the people who didn't post that frequently, are a barrage of their friends posting, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. So there's that. People posting a picture of their spouse, or probably like their wedding or something. Pictures of their kids, just so many pictures of their kids. Here's my kid going to school. Here's my kid on the couch. Here's my kid drawing a picture. Here's my kid, taking a bath. Here's my picture of a kid just walking down the street, like riding a bike. A lot of these are not even artfully done. At least my other friend who I mentioned earlier today, when he takes pictures of his kids, the guy's an artist, the guy's a designer. So he does it in an artful way. So even though it is just pictures of kids or videos of kids, at least it's kind of like a version of watching the Wonder Years. It's kind of like, oh, okay, at least it's artfully done. So it's interesting on some level. But most people out there, they just pull their iPhone out, they just snap a picture. It's like horribly cropped, horribly lit, and nothing really interesting in the picture at all, and not a funny caption, nothing. And it's just like, okay, it's just oodles and oodles and oodles of that content. And again, when you barely know these people, it's kind of like, well, what is the point of any of this, or why do I care? And I'm like, yes, I'm glad the Facebook algorithm is not showing me all that boring shit. But when I go looking for it, when I go clicking through on their profiles to see what they're all about, I'm like, God, this is boring as fuck, And so I've mentioned the pictures of your spouse, the happy birthday wishes, and then the pictures of your kids. And the other thing is, donate to this cause, And then the other thing is like Trump hate. So the same old tired memes, orange man bad, Trump sucks, Trump, I hate Trump, blah, blah, blah. And that's pretty much it. Of all of these profiles, like the 100 or so I looked through in the past week, most everything that people are posting of this subset of 100 that I've looked at is basically that. Variations of that. I don't see any introspective thoughts. I don't see any poems or writings or drawings or art or something creative or like memes that are funny or make you think, that aren't necessarily just bashing Trump or whatever. I don't see links to interesting articles about topics that are just like, oh wow, I never would have known that breed of bird existed, or just something. Give me something, like something remotely interesting. No. And this is what I mean when I say, wow, all these people are carbon copies of each other. And what is the point of me keeping people like this around in my life? So that's why this first wave has been really easy, because we have no history and they're seemingly really boring people, because slight segue here. Let's talk about what a Facebook profile is, what a Facebook page is. Like, what does that even mean to people? And obviously you're going to get a whole lot of different answers on this. But for me, I look at my Facebook profile as being as much about connecting more deeply with my friends as it is sort of a portfolio of my life. So it's kind of like a personal blog, a personal diary. So if I wanted to look back on it, I could be like, oh, wow, yeah, I remember that. Or, oh, yeah, when I thought like that. Or it's interesting to me to think about like how I was thinking in 2016 versus 2018 versus 2020. And to maybe look at patterns and see an evolution there, or a de-evolution, or, but it's interesting to me, right? But that's how I use Facebook. It's full of drawings, it's full of thoughts, it's full of random articles, because for me, the Facebook profile says a lot about the person whose profile it is. And maybe I'm off about that sort of view. Maybe other people don't look at it like that, but that's how I look at it. So for me to look at a very boring, generic carbon copy Facebook profile of all of these 100 people, to me that signifies like, okay, these are kind of boring people. It's actually the same. I'm not going to go off on this tangent here, but like it's the same thing with dating profiles. When I look in the apps and I look at these dating profiles, I'm like, I barely even look at them anymore because it's so generic. It's just like, oh, I like hanging out with my family and friends. I like to go hiking. I like to watch TV and movies. I have a cat. I like to travel. That's it. That's all you have to say for yourself. And, after 25, 30, 35 years of existing on the planet, that's the most interesting presentation you can give of yourself, not an insightful quote or a funny joke or, anything creative at all. It's just like, wow. So really, when every profile is completely generic like that, you end up looking at just the face, the picture of the body, and like, okay, is this person at least physically attractive? Because that's really the only distinguisher. But anyway, like I said, I'm not going to go off on that tangent.
Don't even think about it, Coleman.
I'm not going to go off on that tangent of online dating stuff. So let's stick with friends here now. So, yeah. So I've unfriended nearly 100 people in the past week. Probably when I'm done with wave 1, I will have reached that 100 point. And then things are going to get a little trickier, right? When I get into wave 2. Because then we're talking about me unfriending actual friends that I've had, that I have a history with and memories with. So this isn't just like a one-off person that I met at a party or an event, or where it's easily to just like, they don't even remember who I am probably, and I don't remember this. That's easy. But like when we start getting into the stuff with like people that you actually used to have meals with and go out to parties with, and you'd go to their birthday and they'd come to your birthday, and you knew what was going on in their life and they knew what was going on in your life, and like that kind of thing. Like then we're like, okay, now it's going to get a little bit more difficult. And perhaps I'll get more into this in depth in sort of the part 2 of this discussion, because I want to keep this episode fairly tight, and I don't want it to be a really long one. But leading into that, I want to kind of go through this terminology, right? So I think there's the term friend, right? And everybody has a pretty decent idea of what a friend is. There's obviously different gradations of that, and everybody would define what constitutes a friend or a real friend or a true friend. Everybody's going to make those distinctions differently, right? So for me, I look at friends and acquaintances, right? And I think what I'm realizing is, 743 people, but really most of those are all like acquaintances, and acquaintances are just people you've met and you know who they are. You got acquainted basically, but they're not really friends. So what is a real friend, And like I said, everybody's going to define it differently. But for me, I feel like I have pretty loose criteria for what a friend is. Like, I think a friend is basically somebody, and again, this is sort of my definition now. I wouldn't have said this maybe 10, 15 years ago, but at this point in my life, I feel like a friend is somebody who you enjoy their company, you enjoy their presence in your life, like they add value to your life. They make you, when you think of them, you smile, right? Or you think, wow, what a great person. Or I really, I loved spending time with that person. There's value there, So when you evaluate somebody and you get negative thoughts, negative feelings, and even if you have history with them, you think, when I think of that person, I think of them like nagging me all the time or complaining all the time, or them just being a negative person in general, even if not directed toward me. And this goes to their politics. It goes to their overall presentation on their own Facebook profiles and all these things, where it's not even about them and me, but it's about, again, like just evaluating a person as an individual, removing a little bit of the personal history you have with that person, but just evaluating in a sober way, this person, do I consider them a friend at this point in life? And again, there's various levels of how much a friend is going to come through for you or not. But then again, for me, like, I'm not the kind of person who's really asking anything of anybody, And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how I was raised. I wasn't really raised to like, I know I have certain friends, like they ask for favors all the time, or they're always posting all the time about like, everybody donate to this or support my cause, or, help me with this thing, or please. They got no problem They have no hesitation toward asking their community and everybody for help and assistance and, support me in this. And that's how they operate. And I'm like, part of me looks at that and I think, oh, maybe I need to be more like that. Maybe I need to ask for help more, like I haven't really, all I do is I post a link to this podcast on my Facebook. I just post, hey, here's a link. Here's my guest. Here's what I'm talking about. You can subscribe and listen here on Spotify and YouTube, and that's it. I don't really go around messaging, marketing in that way to all of my 743 friend network. Hey, everybody, come look at this podcast, support it, and do this, and please help me out here. I don't do that. And maybe that's to my own demise. Like maybe I really needed to start asking more of people in my friend network to help and support me in my art and my creativity and all this stuff. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe I need to put myself out there more and ask more of others, But then it's weird because that's not my nature. And I don't know that I want that to be how I operate. I'm not sure. So that's something I'm still feeling out in terms of me asking for people to help me or support, like really asking anything of anybody else and not being such an independent person where I just do my own thing on my own all the time. So I'm feeling that out. But if we're evaluating a friend, a true friend, I think that's reasonable to include that in the criteria, right? Like if you did have to ask them for something, they would come through for you on some level. It's not like if you lost your loved one, your mother, your parent, it's not like all 743 of those friends would fly across the country and come to the funeral, but, they would at least send an email or a call or text message or post on Facebook and say, hey, I'm really sorry for what you're going through. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. It's something like that. That seems like a baseline level for a friend. It's kind of like you wouldn't really ask anything of them, but they'd offer to help anyways, but you wouldn't necessarily take them up on it, but it feels nice that they're there and at least they care, you know what I mean? So it's all kind of for appearances, but I don't know. So that to me is like kind of a loose, vague aspect of the friends that I have. So it's like I'm not asking anything of them ever, but it's nice to know there are some people out there who do care about you and maybe would refer you to somebody or help you out, in a moment of need or whatever, if it came to that. Needless to say, acts of service is not my love language. Obviously, because I'm not really ever asking people to do things for me in those ways. So yeah, the friend, I don't know, like I mentioned earlier how I have those really tight, those core lifelong friends who I know are going to be my friends till the very end. And, whether that's 10 people, maybe that's 20 people, maybe 30, I don't know. But I guess those are like the true friends. And then even amongst that group of friends, you have your inner circle who you talk with like on a daily basis or weekly basis. So yeah, so we got friends, we got acquaintances, which is basically everybody else, the people you just casually know. If you drifted out of their life, it really wouldn't matter to them. And if they drifted out of your life, it really wouldn't matter to you. And I'm in the process of weeding out 100 of the so-called acquaintances. But all right, let's leave it at that for now. I don't want to say anything more about the friends and the acquaintances, but like this other term, well, okay, and then there's enemies, which seems pretty obvious. I don't think you're going to keep many enemies around, as Facebook friends. Strangely enough, I actually had a couple of Facebook friends requests from people who I genuinely disliked earlier in my life, and people who wronged me in certain ways or talked shit about me or treated me very poorly in the past. And out of the blue, they just send me a Facebook friend request and, no sort of apology or like, hey, man, I'm sorry how I treated you in the past, but, I'm sorry and I'd love to connect with you today. I mean, like if somebody did like that, I would be like, okay, all right. I would probably, I might accept that friend request and I might, just say, oh, it's cool, man. It's cool. But if you don't even apologize for what you did in the past, I'm like, okay, I'm not adding you. Like you were an enemy before. You don't just immediately become my friend because 20 years passed. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, we got friends, we got acquaintances, we got enemies. That's fairly clear. Slight variations with each person, I'm sure. And then we got frenemy. Let's talk about this term frenemy. So I looked it up because I wanted to get sort of an official definition on this. So the definition I found online was a frenemy is a person with whom one is friendly despite a fundamental dislike or rivalry. That was interesting. I thought about that definition, and then I started thinking about people in my life, and I'm like, do I have any frenemies? I don't know. I don't really think I do. I think if I really fundamentally disliked somebody or they're a rival, I don't think I would keep them around as a friend. Like, even of the 743 people I had, there's some aspect about them that I like, or we have something in common, for there to be some sort of bond there. But if I just thoroughly disliked somebody through and through without any sort of redeeming qualities, if they're just flat out an enemy, I wouldn't pretend to be friends with them. So I guess that's something people do. They keep people around that they don't like and they pretend to be nice to their face. I mean, I could see if you're forced to do that in like a political or like a work setting where you just have to get along, or, you have to pretend like you're friendly, but you really hate their guts. But my life is so far removed from the workplace, like I don't have coworkers and all that stuff. So like I'm pretty free to just choose who I want to have in my life, sort of in an online social network kind of way. So there really is no room for frenemies in my life. I never really made room for frenemies, so that's really a non-issue for me. So we got friends, we got acquaintances, we got enemies, we got frenemies. And here is the title of the episode, and this idea I want to put out there. And because we're going a little bit late here, I'm not really going to get fully into this now, but I just want to put this idea out there. Remember, this is going to be part 1 of a 38-part series, so more to come on all of this. But unfriend. When people use the term unfriend, I think most of us commonly use it as a verb. You unfriend somebody on Facebook. And, there's unfollowing. I think this is kind of great in a way, like these different levels that Facebook has, right? So it's like the first step, or the first measure someone, well, actually, no, there's actually a step before that. So the lightest measure you can take is you can snooze somebody. So you snooze them, Facebook won't show you anything of theirs that they post for 30 days. So that's like the lightest thing you can do. After that comes unfollowing, of course. So you unfollow them, you're still friends with them, but you're never going to see anything they post ever again in the feed. So, and I might have casually mentioned about this a couple weeks ago, but about a month or two ago, I think I mentioned earlier, even in this podcast, I unfollowed several people and several friends who in the past I've actually gotten along with quite well. But I unfollowed them just for my own sanity, because I just can't take the hate and the negativity, that energy all day, like just being bashed over the head with it. I just can't. So it wasn't so much ill will toward them as it was a self-preservation measure. So so there's snoozing, and then there's unfollowing, and then there's ultimately unfriending. So when you unfriend somebody, that's it, right? So they won't even be notified. They'll just find out someday in the future that, oh, okay, I guess that person unfriended me at some point. All right. And but that's it. But if you think about it, once you unfriend somebody on Facebook, especially if you're not connected in any other way on any other social media, it's kind of like you're probably not going to ever meet or talk with that person ever again, especially if you're not in the same city. So it is kind of a big deal, because you're basically okay with that, right? You're putting your foot down and you're like, you know what? I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm better off without this person in my life from this day forward. So there's that unfriending level. And I think there's one level beyond that, which is, I think after you unfriend somebody, you could also block them. So they really literally have no way to reconnect with you on Facebook. If they later on found out that you unfriended them and then they tried to reconnect with you, they wouldn't even be allowed to do that if you block them. So to my understanding, that is the gradation in Facebook controls. There's snoozing, there's unfollowing, there's unfriending, and then there's blocking. So correct me if I'm wrong on that, and I might very well be wrong on that, but that's my understanding of how that all works. But I want to talk about unfriend not as a verb, but as a noun. And I haven't done proper research into this term, but I don't know if other people have used it as a noun or if this is something new that I'm conjuring up, but I want to talk about it today as a noun. Like, what is an unfriend? because I think there might be a category here where, because I thought it might not have been worth me bringing up unfriend as a noun because I thought, oh, I think the frenemy term probably covers that. But then when I looked up what frenemy meant, as I read earlier, I was like, no, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. So if a person is not really a true friend and they're not a frenemy and they're not an enemy and they're not an acquaintance, that's why I wanted to talk about this term unfriend, because I think there is another categorization here that, again, I haven't done the proper research on this, so maybe that somebody has already classified this as such. I haven't checked Urban Dictionary or whatever for this, but I'm just sitting here thinking about unfriend, like what's an unfriend? And the way I'm defining this term right now, I look at an unfriend as it's almost like milk that's gone sour. You know, in the sense of, well, maybe it was great at one point, but it has gone bad. And it's partially that, but when I really think back and I'm honest about it, I think there may have been a presence of certain people in my life where all along it wasn't actually the best thing for me to go deeper and deeper into friendship with certain people. You know, and I think that also goes to the lack of proper criteria for allowing people into your life, into your inner circle. And I had one friend who, you know, he's full of tough love. He tells it like it is. I respect him for that. And he got on my case, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever, where he was telling me like I've let the wrong people into my life. Like I have poor criteria for letting people into my life. And I pushed back a little bit, but I listened to him and I was like, you know, maybe you're onto something there. And in this moment, with this unfriending exercise that I'm doing, I'm really kind of taking some of what he said to heart. And I'm like, yeah, maybe what I've allowed to have happen is I've allowed a bunch of unfriends in my life. And I'm saying that as a noun, right? So what is an unfriend, you ask? Well, as I'm kind of, I haven't written this all out. I'm just feeling this out, like as we're talking here, and I'm thinking of an unfriend as somebody who you think they're a friend, and you treat them as such, and you think they're treating you as such, but you start to realize, like, are they actually making your life harder? Are they making your life worse? Are they bringing you down? Are they causing you to doubt yourself? Are they like, look, I'm all for tough love. I'm all for, like, you know, being a dissenting voice. My point here is not that we all have to agree on every issue and see eye to eye on everything. Far from it. You know, I have plenty of friends, close friends, where we disagree on certain things, but there's kind of a tonality to it all. There's kind of an air of, it's cool, man. It's cool. Like, I want to hear your points and your reasoning behind why you believe about that issue. And I'm like, okay, now let me lay out my points for why I believe about this in this way. And they're like, okay, all right, I see where you're coming from, but I still think this, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, man. Well, I still think that. I still think this the other way. And it's like, all right, cool. Well, let's go grab a drink, or let's go, whatever. So it's like, we don't allow the issues to tear us apart, or the disagreements to tear us apart. And I'm so glad I just remembered this, because I almost forgot to mention this today. So not that this was a friend, but I wanted to bring this up as an example of what I'm talking about here. So back when I was at Northwestern, I was in this 5-year co-op program, and there was this director of the program. I can't even remember what her name is now for this point, but she was a nice lady, and she was very supportive, and she was great. She was great. I really had a lot of respect for her. She really ran the program well, and she seemed really kind and really supportive of the students and all that. So she was great. But then the time came where I realized, like, I was starting to learn web design on my own, and I was starting to get more creative with Photoshop and art stuff. And I realized I don't want to stay in this engineering program for longer than I have to. So I decided I want to drop out of the 5-year co-op program, take summer classes to make up for the semester I lost by doing an internship that I did before. So basically I wanted to drop out of the 5-year program and get back to my 4-year degree. And luckily it was still possible for me to do that. I just had to make up one semester of classes in the summer. So I went into the office and I met with this lady, the director of the program, and I told her, like, hey, I want to leave the program. I want to graduate on time in 99. And she was so upset with me and so disappointed in me. And I still remember it to this day. And I'm so glad I stuck to my guns, because this has been a problem with me in my life, is that I've always been too nice. I've always been wanting to be liked too much. I've always kind of kept my mouth shut too much. I've always kind of gone with the program and been what I'm supposed to be, or what I thought I was supposed to be. And there was a real danger there where I was going to sacrifice what was in my own best interests out of guilt or out of shame or fear that I'm letting this woman down, this woman who I can't even remember her name now. What does it matter in the grand scheme of things? But here she is shaming me, telling me like how disappointed she is in me and this and that. And I'm like, I remember having that first trace of that idea in my head then, but especially now I'm looking back on it and I'm like, lady, this is my fucking life. I don't give a fuck if you're disappointed in me or if you had different vision for my life I'm like, look, this is my life. I got to make these decisions. I got to live with the consequences. And as I look back, I feel like that was one of the key decisions in my life. And it was one small step in the direction of me taking control of my life and claiming my life and my trajectory in life. And I'm so proud of myself for making that decision, because it was hard enough to make that decision in the first place. But then to do it in the face of this judgment from somebody who I respected and looked up to, and I'm still glad I carried through with that, because you know what? I graduated on time. I was able to go out to San Francisco and get started as a junior designer, and I learned everything on the job. And the next year in 2001, the economy totally collapsed. 9/11 happened, whatever. So if I would have stayed in that 5-year program, again, learning engineering and stuff, which is what I didn't really want to do in my career anyways, I would have been going in the wrong direction and losing another year of my life. And not only that, I would have graduated in the worst possible time when the market was collapsing and nobody was hiring. And I wouldn't have had all that work experience under my belt, having graduated on time and starting out as a junior designer. So looking back, I did the right thing. I did the thing that was in my own best self-interests. I spoke up for myself. So part of the reason why I bring that story up is, again, not that she was a friend, but that's kind of what I mean by she was sort of an unfriend in that moment, in that time. You hear me? So it's almost like it was more about her than it was about me. And I think this is the thing about friendships and relationships. Well, I don't know. I'm not even going to go into like relationships and dating, because that's a whole nother beast. But let's just talk about friendships here. So I think with friendships and a healthy friendship, it's tough. It's really, especially when issues start getting really dicey. Like what if you have a friend and she's married to an abusive husband, right? Of course, you're going to want to advise her, and you want to tell her get out of that abusive relationship, and you don't want her to be harmed. You don't want to, you don't want anything bad to happen to her. So as a friend, you're not going to be very quick to let go of that and just be like, okay, well, it's her decision, it's her life, right? So if you're a true friend, you're going to fight for your views to convince her of something, because you think she's so in the wrong and she's making decisions that will ultimately lead to her demise. I get that. But I think sometimes there are other things that happen in life that aren't as dire as being in an abusive relationship or something, but people act as though they are that dire. And that was one example with this lady in the co-op program, but I think similar things like that happen with friendships. So yeah, since this is just me talking off the top of my head, I'm going to try to wrap things up here and just kind of introduce that term unfriend. And it's something I've started thinking about, and maybe it's good for you to listen to as well, like to really evaluate your quote unquote friends. And again, the recipe that I come up with, I mean, I'm just going to tell you what's working for me. I'm certainly not proclaiming that this is the end all be all and that everybody should operate on this. You know, like, look, I have a lot of friends now, they got like 2,000 Facebook friends. I got 3,000 Facebook friends. I'm like, look, if that's working for you, if you like that, go for it. You know, go have 8,000 Facebook friends. I don't care, you know. But what I'm talking about here is like, I got to figure out what's working for me. And, you know, I just feel like when I post something on Facebook that is my personal view or my feeling about whether it's an external issue out there politically or whatever, or whether it's something internal to my own personal health or my own personal mental well-being or whatever, or my struggle with whatever, professionally, anything, creatively. When I post something like that on, again, like my personal page, my profile, the portfolio of my life experience, again, like I said earlier, that's not necessarily for everybody else. If somebody else wants to chime in and comment on it or question it or like it, that's great. It feels good to be interacting with people in that way. But it's also largely about me. I mean, this is my life. These are my thoughts. And when I put that out there and then I get the notification chime and then I see who commented on it, and my immediate feeling is like, oh God, here we go. What sort of negative whatever am I going to have to deal with here? And then I'm like, now I got to take more time to defend my views to this person. And then it's going to be back and forth. And then they're going to get upset. And then they're going to start telling me that I'm selfish and I'm a jerk and all this stuff. Ad hominem attacks, because we can't just stick to the specific issues at hand. And this is what I mean a little bit when I'm talking about an unfriend. Like, they're your friend, but kind of not really your friend. You know, because a good friend should have known me by now and known my character, you know, that I'm not an asshole. And I'm like, you know what, if you think I'm an asshole, just go ahead and unfriend me. Just because why do you want to be friends with an asshole? If you think I'm an asshole, then unfriend me, because you really shouldn't be friends with assholes or people you think are assholes. But I'm like, you know what? But if you don't think I'm an asshole, then fine, remain friends with me, but don't fucking call me an asshole. You know, which is it? It's one or the other. So yeah, because with all the shit I've been through, and a lot of this, there's so many things I wanted to get into in this talk, and we're already like at an hour, so this is going to have to be in a part 2. Because I wanted to talk about growing up in the military and how much that has affected sort of my decision process in terms of who's going to remain in my life or not. And I also wanted to talk about my religious upbringing and how that's affected my views of friendship, and also being called selfish or an asshole, because my whole life I was called hellbound and a vile sinner since birth. I'm deserving of hell. I've been drilled. That's been drilled into my skull since the day I was born. And finally, I left religion. I'm not cool with that. So anytime people start telling me I'm a selfish asshole for posting that my stomach hurts or something like that, then I'm like, my immediate reaction is kind of like, you know what, fuck off. But yeah, back to the question of like, why do I even want to subject myself to that kind of, I guess you could say, abuse, right? And I become kind of sadomasochistic in that way. You know, there's a simpler solution, which is like to remove that level of abuse from your life. And that's where I'm at right now. And we'll see what happens with wave 2 of the unfriendings. Right now is the easy part. You know, wave 1 is underway, almost done, more than 50% done. And yeah, but one thing I will say is just like moving forward, life is short. I want positive energy in my life, and it doesn't necessarily mean everybody has to agree with me on every issue. That's fine. But like, not just positive energy. Like, I want to be able to go look at a friend's Facebook profile and be like, oh, wow, this is cool, or that's some new music, or that's an interesting article, or like, and not just about BLM and pandemic shit. You know, there's so many other aspects of life. I understand how grave these issues are right now that we're facing, but I'm sick of a lot of it, you know? And not only that, I'm sick of the singular perspective on these very complex issues. And there's no deviation allowed from the mainstream narrative and all that. So, yeah, so it's not just about people being hunky-dory happy all the time, and that's not what I want. Like, I want a blend. I want a balance of, like, cool, smart, caring, interesting, funny, artistic, creative people. And then, you know what, frankly, like, at least from the 100 or so that I've removed, back to what my one friend said, like, he's thinking, like, I've maybe surrounded myself with the wrong people. And, you know, I'm kind of starting to agree with a lot of that, so... You know, but today is July 24th, 2020, and there's only one direction to go from here. You go forward. You go forward. So why are you going to make decisions that are all about the past and cling to things because of what they were in the past when they don't make sense for your future? If you want today to be a great day in your life and you want tomorrow to be even better, and so on and so forth for the rest of your life, why are you going to allow toxicity and abuse in various forms from people, from media channels, from institutions? And, you know, and I don't mean this in like an ignorance is bliss, like block out all sanity, like everybody else is so correct and you're so wrong. And if you blot out the truth and only surround yourself with ignorance and falsehoods, that's the way to go. I'm like, that's not what I'm getting at. Like, anybody who knows me well knows I'm all about pursuing the truth. I'm all about getting to the bottom of things. But the nature of existence in this world is so complex. We're not all going to land in the same place. You know? I used to think that, you know, I was raised to sort of, my parents raised me to be very sort of analytical and math and science because that's the true stuff. They wanted me to veer away from anything subjective like the arts and things like that because they're too wishy-washy, they're too subjective. But now as I've gotten older, it's like even the science-y stuff, the history stuff, well, forget about history. History is like so subjective. Oh my God. Probably more subjective than art and all these other things. It's just like whose story you're going to believe, you know? But I'm starting to realize like a lot of these things are really subjective, you know, when you have 50 experts over here, or even if it's not numeric, if you have 80 experts over here saying one thing and 20 experts saying something else, does that necessarily mean that the 80 are right and the 20 are wrong? You know, what if Galileo is the one saying the earth is round? One person. But all the other 99 experts say, no, the earth is flat. Huh. Who are you going to say is right? Oh, you're going to say, oh, well, the 99 are right because there's 99 of them. Galileo is wrong. So the earth must be flat because 99% are saying it's flat. Like, it doesn't work that way.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
That's not how science works. And, wow, there's so many tangents I can go off on here so really fast. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I've said a lot, and there's a lot more to say, but we'll save that for part 2. Whenever that happens. And I may actually have a special guest on pretty soon where we're going to kind of pick up this conversation and talk about friendships and Facebook and social media, which should be really interesting. So look forward to that. And yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you found this interesting, if nothing else. You know, maybe it's pushing some buttons or getting you scratching your head or thinking about some things in your own life, in which case I think that's cool. So anyway, that's all for now. Today's episode is brought to you by...
All syrup super squishy?
Whoa, that's good squishy.
I hope this has been enlightening for you.
The Introversion Podcast is on its way, but we've obviously got a long way to go to get to where we want to be getting to. I will certainly be doing my part in cranking out new episodes every week, but here's where you come in. If you haven't yet done so, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're currently listening on. That way you can obviously get notified as soon as new episodes arrive. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give a 5-star rating. It just takes a second, and it will empower the Introversion Podcast to rise up and conquer the suppression of algorithms that would otherwise crush this fledgling podcast into unknown oblivion. So yeah, please leave a rating, and even better, an actual review. Just a few words expressing what you dig about the podcast honestly would mean the world to me and would really help provide the motivation to keep this baby growing. Also, I'd love to hear from you at any time. Comments, questions, or if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, send an email to podcast@introversion.com. You can also connect with me on social media. I am Jay Kaslow. That's JayKaslo on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, pretty much wherever. I really want the Introversion Podcast to be something special. Raw, informative, entertaining, experimental.
Inconceivable.
Enlightening, therapeutic for you and me. Let's keep the conversations going about a range of topics that affect us all. Let's rise above all the hate and sickness and sadness and strife that plague this world. Let's seek to better understand each other and ultimately live our best lives. Seriously, let's do this thing.
Thank you. Bye now. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.